Hey guys, Wes with Dirt Concepts. Today we're going to talk about gas trucks and setting up your brake linkage as well as your brake settings in your transmitter for optimum performance on the track. So let's get started. So as I said, today we're going to talk about brake linkage setup as well as the settings in your transmitter for gas truck applications. Now, I think that the stuff I'm going to talk about today is probably applicable to really any kind of gas truck. I'm going to try to keep conceptual and try to cover more of the theory behind why we're doing these changes. All right, so first thing is, why are your brakes so important? Well, in a two-wheel drive application, especially in low grip track conditions, having your brakes dialed in perfect is actually a good way to dramatically improve your lap times. So for example, corner entry, you don't want to be locking up the rear tires. Remember, you only have two rear brakes, and all that weight, whenever you brake, it's going to shift to the front of the car off the rear tires. So it's really important that that brake action, it begins really smooth, but then it can really clamp down as you are pushing full 100% on your brakes with your transmitter. Another thing is drag brake. So commonly, with electric applications, a lot of times you'll run a lot of drag brake, especially low grip applications. It can generate traction, corner entry. But in my opinion, at least my feeling with Nitro Stadium truck, I don't like to run any drag brake. I want the wheels to be as free spinning as possible. And the reason is it allows me to control my brakes 100% then. When I'm going off a jump, because I'm running so much rear weight bias, since it's low grip tracks and a gas truck, the front end, it wants to nose up, and it's a stadium truck. The bodies kind of catch the air too. So having full control of your brakes with no drag brake, it allows you to kind of manipulate the attitude of the truck and get that front end down so then you can land correctly. So how do you take out the drag brake in your gas truck linkage? Well, first off, I got to go ahead and power it up. All right, I'm on. Get my transmitter on. Boom. Okay. So looking at this, if I don't want to run any drag brake, what I'm looking for is play in my brake linkage arm. You can see how it has a little bit of movement there. That's called deadband. So the total deadband that I prefer to run, and this is after a lot of testing, I prefer to run my deadband at 3.5 millimeters. So that'll be the gap here between, that's basically how much this thing moves. It's 3.5 millimeters. So start out with that setting and let me know what you think. So the nature of gas truck linkages, it's just kind of tricky to set up. It's very asymmetrical. It's kind of off angle, the way the linkage is kind of set up, and you'll see what I'm talking about compared to like a nitro buggy or nitro trucky, for example, where everything is very in line with 90-degree angles. It's very easy to kind of eyeball and set it up. So let's take a look at my throttle linkage, because I think that's a good starting point. Once you get your throttle linkage set up, then the brake linkage setup will kind of fall into place. So just like before, first things first, you want to power up the truck, which you can see mine's on, the transponder is blinking. The first critical measurement here is it's your total brake throw is really what you're looking for. So that's the amount of movement that I can get from my throttle servo horn all the way to the ball cup on the throttle slide, on the slide. It's a total of 35 millimeters of throw. So that's what I dial in for mine with a slide carb application. Obviously for rotary, it's going to be different. This is just for slide carb. The next thing you want to look at is your deadband in your throttle, which I run about 0.5 millimeters. You can see there, it's about a business card thickness, I would say. Really, the engine is just going to idle better, and also you won't have that kind of runaway feeling whenever you let off the throttle. So 35 millimeters is that key measurement here. So one of the things I was talking about before was setting up your throttle linkage so it's in line with the slide on the carb. So you can kind of see here how it is in line, and it's kind of hard to see. So you can kind of see it there. So what I do is I go to halfway through my throttle pull, and that's where I'm aligning it, okay? Because I know for most of the throttle pull, then if I set up perfect for halfway, it'll be as close as possible, and that's going to minimize any wear and tear on the slide of the carburetor. You can see here that the servo horn is not necessarily 90 degrees to the servo. It's a little off center, and a lot of that is just based around I am aiming to get my throttle linkage set up correctly. That is the most important part. The next step from here is measuring the amount of clamp that your brake pads have onto the brake rotor. So the key measurement here is you're looking at, well, first off, if you have an Ignite truck, you can get this special, they're the V2 machine bushings here for the brake caliper. And it basically sets the amount of travel that your brake pads can have. Now, realistically, you want between, I would say, a 0.5 millimeter play to 3.5 millimeters of total play between the brake disc and the pads, if you don't have the spacers. So I think for any other application, that's probably what you would want to shoot for, which you can sometimes, I guess, use shims, like ball stud shims, for example, to do that. Another key measurement is the thickness of your carbon fiber brake rotor in this case, or it could be made out of Kevlar or steel, or whatever comes in your gas truck kit. This one is 1.8 millimeters thick. You want to jot that down, because I've had problems before where these things wear out and you don't have enough brakes and you can't figure out what's going on with the linkage. It's really just the thickness of the rotor. It's gotten a little thinner. So you want to make sure that's definitely at least not too worn down so you can get maximum clamp force with your brakes. So next we're going to talk about transmitter settings and kind of why you would set the transmitter as such. So let's get started. All right, let's set our brake and throttle endpoints first. When you're doing your throttle endpoint, I go ahead and take off the air filter boot so I can look and see how far the carburetor slide is opening. You want to get 100% travel on that. That's really all I'm looking for. And I reset that basically every time that I pull the engine out of the truck. I go ahead and just do a double check. As far as the brakes, what you're looking for is, well, first off, you never want to exceed the amount that your spring can compress on your throttle end. That'll be really hard on the carburetor slide, so want to definitely avoid that. So what I'm looking for is, you can see here that the brake bulkhead is just slightly flexing. So I think that's about the max that I would feel comfortable with running. So that's kind of what you're looking for if you have an Ignite truck. Now, as far as conceptually, what you're looking for is you do not want to lock up the brakes basically anytime you get on them. But you want enough brakes to be able to get the front end down when you go off of a jump. So it's kind of hard to give you an exact of where you need to be. You need to drive the truck, and it depends on the track and the layout, obviously the setup of the truck, and you can kind of get to your sweet spot. So again, you don't want to lock up the tires when you get on the brakes, full brakes, and you want to also have enough brakes to be able to nose the front end down. So as far as other settings, another one that I like to use is Expo. So that's your exponential, and it's basically the curvature of your throttle pull, or I guess your steering, it could be dual rates or Expo there. For the throttle and brakes though, I run actually quite a bit of exponential on my rear. And I do that just because of the short travel of the brakes here, and it gives me kind of a wider range to be able to use my finger to adapt to the track conditions. I like to run negative 45% on my exponential on my brakes. On my throttle, I don't like to run any Expo, but unfortunately with gas trucks, they're just, you know, especially on low grippy and two-wheel drive, they can be a little bit of a handful sometimes. So I run about negative 15 to negative 20, depending on the grip level of the track on my throttle exponential. I run my dual rates on my throttle and brake at 100% all the time, because I want to make sure that I'm getting my full throttle pull, as well as I'm getting my full power of my brakes that I've set the linkage for. All right, that wraps that one up. If you have any questions, you can drop a comment below. While you're at it, smash the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed already, and as always, I appreciate the watch, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.